What's up guys, it's Alec Torelli, and today I'd like to talk about poker being a zero-sum game, and is it wrong to play poker because it is a zero-sum game, and in order for you to win, somebody else has to lose. I get a ton of questions about this, DMs on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, about people that almost feel guilty about playing the game of poker because they always feel like they're taking money from someone else, and there's this sense of guilt that comes with that, and they feel like it's almost wrong to play the game because their talents are being, wasted or channeled in an area where they're not producing any value or creating any value for society. And there's some guilt and sense of shame that comes with that. And I think it's important to have this discussion in the poker community because a lot of people I know out there dedicate a lot of their time, energy, and effort to playing the game and improving at the game. And I think I've had some experience in this area, and hopefully some of my insights will help make people feel better about playing the game of poker in general, and then hopefully this will spark a discussion where you guys can share your thoughts and feedback in the comments below. I would love to hear from you guys, so be sure to leave your thoughts in a comment as well. First of all, I'd like to share a little bit about my story and how I feel about dedicating a large part of my life, a large part of my time to playing a game instead of using my talents and creative energy towards potentially making a better impact in the world. And that's something that I think you have to kind of come to terms with. You have to kind of accept that you're going to be dedicating a large or a good amount of your time towards something that ultimately isn't producing. It might be producing a little bit of value in the form of entertainment, or you're providing an outlet for other people to find entertainment, and you're the house providing value for them in that way. But ultimately, even if you can argue there is some entertainment value that you provide by playing the game of poker, by creating that atmosphere or environment, or entertaining or humoring other people, I think you could argue that you're not providing the most amount of value that you could. Assuming you have the talents to win at a high level in poker, you probably have other talents that could help you provide value in other places in society. Which sort of brings up the question, at what point is the job that you're doing okay, right? If poker's not going to provide a lot of impact on society in a positive way, then should we be choosing jobs that only provide the highest amount of impact? Is it morally better to choose the jobs with the highest amount of impact, or is any job that brings you happiness the moral high ground, right? So if you chose a job as a barista instead of a doctor, then is that morally wrong? If you had the capability of becoming a doctor and you said, what's really going to make me happy is to be a waiter, is that wrong because the doctor provides more value to society? So it's worth mentioning that even though there's always something you can do that could make a bigger impact, it definitely makes sense that poker players feel this more often, and there perhaps is more critique of people that spend a lot of time playing poker because of the fact that there is one of the least amount of values offered to society from playing the game itself. And while it's true that poker is, zero sum, life is not. And so I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of poker players are doing amazing things in society and the bigger world with the money they're making playing poker. A lot of them turn into entrepreneurs and end up helping other people and doing other things in society, like they start businesses and they end up, dipping in poker for a decade-long time span, and then they use the money and the talent and the influence and the resources that they gather in poker to do great things in the world. Other poker players stay in poker, but they use a large portion of the money they make doing things that help society as well. People like Dan Smith doing a matching charity donation where he's giving back millions of dollars to charities and matching dollar for dollar donations. It's a great example of even though I'm not sure what other things he's doing personally, but even if him or other players were to spend all of their productive hours playing the game of poker, if they're giving millions of dollars back to charity, they're arguably making bigger impact than even people that have jobs that make a bigger impact than poker, because the sheer amount of money and volume being raised from these from their time and from their efforts and contribution to the game of poker, what has allowed them to make that contribution was the game, and so presumably they're making bigger impacts as well. So there's a lot of things I feel like people can do with their time and with their money that they don't have to feel this sense of guilt for playing the game, because a lot of people have this same frustration. But I think the problem is that poker perhaps takes up too much of the slice of the pie that I mentioned earlier. And I noticed for me personally, when poker is 100% of my life, that's fine. But when it's 100% of my life for too long, that's when I start to feel that frustration and anxiety that I'm not doing something. Anxiety is the right word, but frustration and emptiness that I'm not doing something else that's more important. That's why I love YouTube, because it allows me to share the values and messages and the things I've learned from the game of poker and apply them to life and business and other things, and hopefully that message inspires other people. And that's not zero sum. There's something of value being created with my time, but ultimately the language that I speak is poker, and because I've dedicated a large part of my life to the game, it allows me to connect with thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that I wouldn't have been able to connect with if I did something else, because those people that I'm connecting with all speak the language of poker, and perhaps they like my message because I'm relating things from poker to life in a way that other people haven't. And so poker's allowed me to do that. So that's not zero sum. And so I think everybody has to find their own sort of place where they're making their own contribution, and they also have to be aware of what balance is right for them. Again, this is non-judgment free zone, so I think it's important not to judge other players depending on where they are in their journey, but ultimately every one of us has to figure out individually what level and how we're going to contribute and give back and do other things with our time or our money or other resources that we have, because our network or whatever it is, you gain a lot of things from playing poker. You meet a lot of interesting people, you can make a lot of money, you can learn a lot of interesting and important skills, and it's up to each one of us individually to use those things to end up figuring out what we're going to do with them, to channel them in a way that's not zero sum, so that we don't feel that sense of emptiness or lack inside. And there's a lot of things that could happen. And so it's important to kind of keep the perspective that, just because you're maybe making your money playing poker or dedicating a large portion of your time playing poker, that also opens up other doors and avenues to you that it wouldn't open to other people, or that wouldn't have opened to you if you didn't play poker. So for example, if you're making money playing poker and you're making, $50 or $100 an hour instead of making, 10 or 15, with that additional money, you can give a portion of that to charity and be more impactful than you would in a different job, and do something you love, and have more free time to start a business on the side that solves a problem for society as well. And so that's all happening because of the hours that you're spending at the table, or because of the time you're spending, solving Poker Cruncher. And, you could argue like, look, poker might be zero sum, but in my opinion, if Dan Smith's giving millions of dollars to charity, I would want him to spend a large part of his time studying the game to beat other people who are doing less valuable things with their money, so that he can win their money and re-channel it into a place that's more efficient in the world. And that makes sense to me. That's sort of how I think about it. So I know this is a big subject. I'd love to hear your thoughts. One other thing I have found that works really well for me is to combine these two things, and basically make sure that I'm connecting the time I'm playing at the poker table to a purpose or a goal that's bigger than myself. So a lot of times I feel like you could feel like a hamster on a wheel playing poker, where you're just kind of like sitting there and you're playing a lot of hours and you're like, what am I doing this for? Where is this going? What am I building? And it's easy to look back at the last 5 years and say like, what have I really built? When you quit the game, there's nothing tangible that you've left behind aside from the time you spend at the table. But it's not like you built a school or you started a company where you can see that there's something physical, tangible, like a building that's standing, or employees, companies with employees. In poker, it's not like that. It's just like you're always trading that time for money at the table. And so if you feel like you've had this frustration, or what's worked really well for me when I'm feeling this kind of sense of lack is like to connect my poker playing with a goal or purpose that's bigger than myself. So what I mean by that is saying like, okay, what is it that I want to use the game of poker for, to do in my personal life, or to give back, or to make a contribution? And so one thing could be something that you've always wanted to do. It doesn't have to be some like grand goal, like, save humanity, or, save all the starving kids in Africa. It could just be something like, what I've always wanted to do is move to another country and learn a language. But if I make, $20,000 this year playing poker, I can take 6 months off and do that. And I couldn't do that if I didn't make money playing poker. And so that's something that you can have connected to the time that you're at the table. So when you're playing, sitting there grinding, you're like, okay, there's something that I want to do that would be deeply meaningful for me, that if I made this money playing poker, or when I'm studying the game, or when I'm, sacrificing other things I could be doing for the game, there's a reason I'm doing it that's meaningful to me. Another thing could just be your other goals or things you have in your life. Like I've always wanted to start this business, and you set up a business plan and you say, okay, well, I need $10,000 to do it, and I need more free time, but if I make money playing poker, I'm gonna have that money and I'm gonna have that time. And so there's other things that are happening in my life because of the game of poker. So it's important to kind of like tie it back to the game and realize that it is the game itself that's allowing you perhaps to do these things, or using a part of that side income you're earning from poker to do something that is really deeply meaningful to you, not just buy more dumb shit you don't need. And so I think it's what ultimately we do with the time, with the money and the freedom that poker creates, that makes the difference as to whether poker ends up being something that feels zero sum, or it's actually something that is making a greater contribution and impact in society. So I know this is a big video with a lot of controversy perhaps, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is it wrong to play poker? What do you think about it being a zero sum game? And please share your thoughts in the comment below. I'd love to learn something from you as well. And if you like this video, share it with someone that you think would enjoy it as well, or that needs to hear this message. I'd greatly appreciate that too. Thanks for your time. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.